Thank you so much, Samantu and Anand, for the interesting stuff that you've been talking with us about, the groundbreaking work that you've been doing. And now I'd like to kind of add to the pile and see if I can get everybody excited about some more groundbreaking and interesting breakthrough stuff that we have to discuss today. So the first thing I want to do is just promise you that we're going to try and hit 2 goals today. They're big goals, but you can come back at the end and tell me whether I've actually managed to hit these or not. The first one, I'm going to try and get you to change the way you think about your target audiences. And secondly, even bigger, I'm going to try and get you to change the way you look at the whole world. And the best way to begin is always with a story. So let me tell you a story I call the story of Bob and Sally. It was about my past. I used to have a marketing firm, and what we did specifically was help large-scale real estate developers sell out their condo towers or their resort communities, sometimes mixed-use complexes, master plan communities. We did this all over the world. We were really, really good at this. It was a very successful company. And for 10 years, every single one of these projects started the same way, much the same way every project starts in every organization, including the ones you're working at or leading yourselves. It's with a description of a target audience. And given the time and what we were doing, the descriptions of target audiences we had were always pretty much the same. It was aging baby boomers moving out of their single-family home in the suburbs and trying to relocate into a stacked urban environment in a downtown condo in Gotham City. And they were so similar, project after project after project, that I ended up just referring them all to as Bob and Sally. And Bob and Sally were aging baby boomers. They were empty nesters. They had a certain kind of car they liked to drive. There were certain brands they preferred. These are kind of interchangeable descriptions demographically of these folks and a little bit of psychographic information about their past behaviors and emotions around, their second home, their third home, that kind of stuff. You get the picture. We're all very familiar with these target audience descriptions. Now, the interesting thing about the real estate development world and working in that particular vertical is there's a beginning and a middle and an end. And unlike brand advertising for Coca-Cola, for example, that just goes on forever, I got to see what the impact was of our work. So as the marketing firm, we'd take $1 million, we'd run around and try and get a whole bunch of people to buy these condos. And it always ended up with the same thing. There was this question at the end of the process. We'd be in a room 2 years later and we'd see everybody who bought those condos. We'd be standing around with a glass of cheap champagne and a shrimp on a stick. And we'd look around and 10% of the people in the room were Bob's and Sally's. But who are all those other people? We hadn't spent any time or money talking to them at all. And yet they were here. They didn't resemble Bob and Sally one iota. So who are these mysterious 90%? When I sold my company about 5 years ago, I set out to see if I could solve that question and see where that might lead. And it took us on a little bit of a journey, which begins with this thought. Every organization on earth is all out. We're all out trying to do exactly the same thing, trying to find a group of people who are interested in what we're doing and get them to do the things we'd like them to do, get them to make the decisions we'd like them to make. So how do people make decisions? Let me tell you about 3 friends in an alley at midnight. 3 friends are out having a few drinks. They haven't seen each other for a very, very long time because pandemic, isolation, lockdown. They haven't been allowed to be out at their favorite pub having a few drinks, and they've had a few drinks too many. The smart one in the group says, I think we should call it. It's an early morning tomorrow, and they decide to leave. And they're walking down the street. They're noisy, and they're loud, and they're punching each other in the shoulder and having a great time, and then they turn a corner, and all of a sudden, there's a dark alley, and they have to decide what they're going to do. Now, friend number 1, the only thing we know about friend number 1 is the primary value in life is adventure, and things going down this dark alley is the best idea they've ever heard. Let's go down the dark alley. How much fun is this going to be? What a great way to end the night. We're a little bit drunk, and I love you guys. Let's do this. And friend number 2, the only thing we know for certain is that friend number 2's primary value in life is safety, and things going down that dark alley in the middle of the night is the most ridiculous idea they've ever heard. Let's go back to the bar, turn on the lights. We may even have to call the police. We're a little drunk, and I love you guys. And friend number 3, the only thing we know for certain is that friend number 3's primary value in life is friendship and doesn't care if we go down the dark alley, go back to the bar, as long as we stick together because we're a little drunk. And I love you guys. That's the end of the story. There's the moral of the story, though, is that we didn't need to understand, and neither did they, what their demographics were or their psychographics to understand how they were going to make a decision. So if we're all here trying to get some people to make the decisions we'd like them to do, what did we just learn? Demographics and psychographics have no bearing on the decision-making process. The only thing that matters is what their values are. and what they care about. Now, it's not just my fun little story. It's also behavioral science for decades now has been studying this and trying to figure out what is the secret to the way people make decisions. Let's quickly touch on 3 of the many fields of behavioral science that fall under that umbrella. The first one is neurology. Now, neurologists will talk to you about the prefrontal cortex of your brain. It's the CEO of your brain. I'm sure you've heard that before. Its job is to take all the incoming data, everything that you encounter in the course of your day, sight, sound, smells, everything, sort it all out and say, here's how we're going to behave. We're going to go do this. We'll make this decision. We're going to react that way based on this incoming data. It only uses, your prefrontal cortex only uses one set of filters to make all those decisions. And that's your values. What's most important to you? Kind of makes sense though, doesn't it? If family is the most important thing in your life and something comes along that's going to be great for your family, you're going to want that. It'll make you happy when you get it. And if something comes along that might be bad for your family, you're going to avoid that and you'll be anxious until you know that the danger has passed. So neurologists weigh in very firmly after decades of study that what we value determines everything we do. And so do psychologists. Psychologists talk about this in all kinds of ways, but if we just think about the term confirmation bias, it's a thing we're supposed to avoid when we're doing research and putting surveys together, because it's a fancy term for the basic human tendency to say yes to the stuff that we already agree with and that we already think is important, our values, in other words. So that'll skew the results unless you're very careful about the way you put your surveys together. But what if we could turn that around? What if psychologists are onto something here? What if confirmation bias, we knew in advance what it would be for that group of people that we're trying to get to do the things we'd like them to do? Well, if they're inexplicably drawn towards that because of confirmation bias, then that means what we know becomes a powerful tool instead of something to avoid. So keep that thought, because now we're going to talk about sociology. This is what we are. We're a sociological data company. We help companies, other companies, understand how to use sociological data to influence the folks they're trying to influence. Sociologists study large groups of people. Why did this group of people go do this thing and this other group of people go do this other thing? Think about it in terms of voting. Why did these folks vote for that guy and these folks vote for that person over there? It always comes down to what they value, what they care about most. So there we have all 3 fields of human behavior that we talked about today. They're all on the same page here. What we value determines everything we do. I want to talk for a moment about the hypothetical chocolate bar. Let's pretend this thing I got in my hand is a chocolate bar. Now you're in a stadium. It's filled with, let's say, 18 to 24-year-old women who have an MBA. And they're married. So we have married 18 to 24-year-old women who have an MBA. There's a demographic target audience description. What could you say to them? How could you design this chocolate bar so that they'll all want one? You kind of be guessing, right? I mean, to be silly about it, they're women, so maybe it should be pink. Maybe we need cursive text. They all have an MBA, so maybe it needs to look like, kind of like businessy somehow. I mean, you're making stuff up. You're just taking guesses. But what if I told you just one value that they all had in common? And let's say that value is health and well-being. They all highly, highly value health and well-being. It's an absolutely magnetic value for them. Well, now just knowing that one value they share in common, regardless of their demographics, you can say, well, gee, this is a chocolate bar that's all about being healthy and well. It's divided into 7 little segments so that you can have one each day. And each day it's a reward, let's say, for accomplishing a goal or a task that you set yourself around your own mental health and well-being. Well, now it's absolutely magnetic because you're talking to them about what they care about. That's basically what Valuegraphics is all about. So we'd solved the problem, we thought. We knew why those people were going to come and do the things we wanted them to do. But, this is where we found the problem. The problem is there was no way to know the shared values of an entire target audience. Psychologists can do this easily, one-on-one. They can sit down and ask a bunch of questions, an MMPI inventory, a Myers-Briggs test, something like that, and they can tell you what your values are, one person at a time. But when we're talking about an entire target audience, it becomes very hard to understand which values are in play for all of them so that you know what you can say, what you can design, what you can offer that they will find magnetically appealing. So that's what we set out to solve. Can we make a tool that does this? So the first step was we had to find something similar. Nobody had ever done this before. We needed a model. We needed something that we could look at and say, let's do it like that. So we turned to the Human Genome Project because about 10 years ago, geneticists around the world finally managed to map all the different component parts that are necessary to understand a biological human. So depending on which of those component parts are in play, you're tall or you're short, you're blonde, you're a redhead, you're male, you're female, you have different amounts of pigment in your skin. All of those sorts of characteristics are determined by those component parts and what order they show up in your system. This is sort of the hardware for what it is to be human. So we said, why don't we do that? Why don't we map all the values that are necessary in order to understand the software for the human, for the operating system for the human? And that's when we launched the Valuegraphics project. And that's what we've done. Now, fortunately, those poor geneticists, they have like 3 million component parts they have to worry about. We only have a few. There's only 56 core human values that drive all of our decisions, behaviors, and emotions all around the world. And we know this after almost 750,000 surveys now in 152 languages, and we're statistically accurate, more so than you need for a Harvard MBA in 180 countries around the world. That's pretty remarkable. And we now know the component parts that are necessary to understand if a human is going to be environmentally focused, if they're a family person, if they're all about personal growth and ambition, which are the values that are determining all the decisions they make. And we can map those 56 values for any target audience anywhere on Earth. Now, it turns out, after looking at all this data, that all those demographic cohorts that we have been using for so long to understand each other, male, female, 18 to 24, millennials, boomers, MBA, all of that kind of stuff, they're only about 10.5% accurate. The people within any one of those labels only agree with each other. It's only cohesive about 10.5% of the time around the world. Valuegraphics, on the other hand, if you use values to understand what's similar in a group of people, they're 8 times more effective. That's an 8x for every dollar an hour that you spend trying to talk to your target audience, engage them, and get those folks to make the decisions you'd like them to make. I don't know about you. I'd way rather be spending $1 that's going to deliver 8x than one that's going to deliver 10.5% based on the demographics and psychographics that I think are the answer, which we now know they aren't. Let me put this in a little bit of context, and then I'm going to share some data from the data set just for you. What we were missing all along here was the third leg of the three-legged stool. The first leg is demographics. Still need them. Still important to be able to describe, put a fence around a target audience and understand what those people are. Maybe the fact that they're female is really important for the product or service that you're responsible for. But that's it. That's all we know, is that perhaps they're female or what age they are. It doesn't tell us anything else about who those people are. Psychographics, still important. It's a record of how people have behaved in the past and what their emotions and decisions have been. And that's interesting information to see, because you might be able to see patterns in there that you want to sustain. But until you also have value graphics, you're making a guess about how to activate that group of people and get them to make the decisions you'd like them to make. We're working with groups like PayPal and the United Nations Foundation, Lululemon, and Genesis. Genesis is interesting. They're a global firm that runs contact centers, it's a software for contact centers all the way around the world. 7 billion contact center transactions every year go through Genesis software, and we help them understand workers in contact centers all around the world. Arc'teryx, a competitor to North Face, we help them with their global positioning. We're working with brands like 5-Star and Mead, school supplies and office supply companies like that. And I want to tell you one little story that's a bit of proof around how we work. It's a really fun, small little story. I call it the new rental management KPI. We had a client come to us who was launching a new rental management company. So they'd take over condo buildings or apartment buildings and be the rental management company. And what do renters want? What do they care about? What are their values? That's what they asked. And so we ended up doing a Valuegraphics profile them and telling them the answer. And they built their whole product and process around that information. And here's the KPI that came from that. Inexplicably and unexpectedly, they started getting thank you notes from renters. Now, who's ever written a thank you note to their property management company before? The CEO of this company runs around now with a stack of thank you notes from tenants saying, this is the best rental experience. I'm never moving out of this building. Thank you so much. That made my heart grow 3 sizes bigger that day, just like the Grinch at Christmas. Let's look at some data that I pulled from the database just for you guys. A few global insights to begin with. Remember, there's 56 core human values that run every decision, behavior, and emotion for every human everywhere on Earth. So here's a few that are kind of interesting. There's a set of 5 we call the togetherness values. They show up all over the Earth in every sector that we're working in with Wall Street hedge funds, the stuff we've done with Lululemon, whether we're talking about B2B, B2C, we always as humans have ways we want to be with each other. And it always is some of the most motivating data points that come up in any profile in any industry or sector. There's a group of 3 called the security values. These are different ways that people want to feel safe and like all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. There's another cluster that I like to call the reciprocal values. This is about loyalty, love, respect, and patience. You have to kind of earn these in order for them to be given. So people for whom these are important, as a brand, you need to understand that you have to earn this stuff and then they will give you this stuff. There's achievement values, of course. Humans want to achieve, or many of us do, not all of us, but many of us do, around things like wealth, money, ambition. These are score-keeping mechanisms that will be absolutely magnetic for the right groups of people. Empathy is another cluster that we can identify in there. Some really interesting specific parts of the world have different things. In China, harmony, it's the only place in the world where harmony shows up in the top 3. Depending on who you are and what you're trying to accomplish, knowing that about the population of China could be a very valuable piece of competitive information. And in the Middle East, not religion and spirituality, but morality shows up second overall for everybody of all 56 values. Fascinating stuff. In the United States, health and well-being, which many Americans find hard to believe given what they believe is true of their country. However, health and well-being is a very personal thing. For some people, it's very important, and for others, it's more just about, going for a walk in the woods on the weekend, and some it's about being absolutely fit and going to the gym every day. So it varies. I'm going to show you a couple of Valuegraphics charts now and give you a couple of messaging examples just to show you how this stuff works. This is a chart I pulled for all Americans, Gen Pop, versus online shoppers. Now, down the left-hand side are the values of the 56 that are most important to them. I don't have time to talk about all of these today. I want to just focus on one at the very, very top of the list. For online shoppers, the most important thing in their life is relationships. So I found this company the other day that's amazing. At the end of my the pen I use on my iPad, there's a little tip you can put on it so it feels more like a pencil. And in their newsletter, they were saying, we know you're a creative person because you bought our product. And we thought sometimes it must get lonely, particularly right now during the pandemic and isolations and lockdowns and all those sorts of things. So we're going to introduce you to other folks. So fill out this little profile so we understand what you're all about. Let us match you up with a pen pal so that you have some folks that you can talk to about our products or about whatever else is going on in your world. Wonderful way of leveraging the value of relationships for online shoppers. Here's a chart for tech unicorns. Now, this is a group of people who are AI cloud engineers or, very, very difficult to find and difficult to pin down across the workforce in the United States of America. And we're comparing them here against just mid-managers across the board, in all organizations in the United States. Here's 3 values, 3 magnetic values that will really be incredibly appealing to tech unicorns: belonging, ambition, and upward mobility. So here's a question. How could you recruit these folks? They're the rarest tech talent out there. How can you get them to come and work at your company? Well, what if you just own the elephant in the room? Given those 3 values, and we know, and they know, they're not staying with you forever. So what if you just admit it and say, you know what, part of what happens when you come and work here is we realize you're going to move on, so we're going to help you. We're going to put together a program of education to help you advance your career and understand how to clear the path to your next promotion internally, hopefully, but if not, outside. Instead of pretending it's not going to happen, just own the elephant in the room. Here's a chart for tech deciders. These are people who are the decision makers for enterprise tech purchases within large-scale organizations in the United States. Here's 3 values I thought were interesting here and help me tell a little bit of a story: security, experiences, and community. Now, what if you were trying to figure out a thought leadership theme for your enterprise tech product? Let's say you have an app or you have I don't know what it might be, some software, whatever it is, some enterprise level tech, and you're trying to get these folks to feel like they're part of your family. What would a thought leadership idea be that would make sense for these folks? Well, given those values, what if you had an insiders only, because community, peek behind the curtain? So you'd be activating security, experiences, and community by showing them a demonstration or a tour of the security features that are built right into your product or your service. They're going to want to feel part of that group because that's an insider-only thing. So you're activating all three of those values with that program. The point being, that may not even be a practical idea, but the point is you would never have come to that powerful idea or version of that powerful idea if you hadn't understood what they cared about and what their values are. And what we're doing here is what you call values thinking. You're just taking what you've got and looking for where it overlaps with what they want. Values thinking, much like design thinking, you can solve any problem about anything in your organization. Communication, creation, culture, doesn't matter. As long as you understand what the people you're trying to impact actually care about and what their values are. So, how can you find the values of your target audience? There's three ways. You can hire us, but you know what? We love doing that stuff, but it's not free and it's not for everybody. You can buy my book, my current book, which is on Amazon. It's called We Are All the Same Age Now. And there's a quiz in there you can use to find out. It's 10 questions long. Send it out to your CRM system and ask people these 10 questions, and it'll point you to one of the biggest archetypes in the data set for Canada and the United States. Or for free, you can simply ask these three questions the next time you send out a survey or train your frontline sales team or the folks in your contact center to ask some version of these questions and watch for the signals, the patterns in the noise. The first question, why do you go to work every day? Why? You're going to hear different answers to that, but you'll start to see themes emerge, and those themes are the values bubbling to the surface. And number two, why would you give away half of your newfound lottery winnings? Why? Doesn't really care where they're going to give it, but why would they do it? And thirdly, this is my favorite one of all. What would you say to your 10 years ago self? And why would you choose to say those things? So you see the theme here. It's about why. If you can get people to start telling you why they make some of these decisions, you'll start to see, if you ask enough people, you'll see patterns and themes, and those are the values that you can then start to target as you're starting to talk to your audience. Three things I'd like you to take away today, and then I'll wrap up quickly. The first thing, that story about three friends in an alley at midnight, that they use their values to make decisions. It's a great way to explain to other people in your team or other people in your network why values are the answer to getting people to do the things you'd like them to do. The three-legged stool. Remember, we need demographics and psychographics, but also value graphics in order to fully understand and be on firm and stable ground when it comes to trying to influence our target audiences. And thirdly, those three telltale questions that I just gave you. And by the way, you can download this whole deck and take all that stuff away. I hope you don't worry about writing all this stuff down, because you can just have all these slides. I'd love for you to be able to use this information. Now, I'd like to just close quickly by ending where we started. Those mysterious 90% of the people that were in the room back when I was doing real estate marketing, turns out they weren't so different after all. I was standing in that room looking around and going, wow, these people don't resemble each other. They are not demographically alike. And that's the point. They were valuegraphically alike. They were all there because we were inadvertently saying some things that triggered some values that got those folks to magnetically be attracted to purchasing the things we were trying to get them to buy. So the room didn't look to me like they were all similar, but in fact, they were all identical valuegraphically. And so the mystery's been solved. But here we go. This is much, much bigger than that. Much bigger than the 8X that we can bring to companies who start to think about the world value-graphically. And it's all about the fact that demographics create an incredibly binary view of the world. Demographics are inherently divisive. Every conversation begins with a question about, is this about rich or poor, young or old, male or female, black or white, gay or straight? No wonder we have such division and anxiety and stress in our world right now. And demographics are fueling stereotypes. Men are like this, women are like that, gay people are like this. And those demographic stereotypes are the reason we're still grappling with racism and ageism and sexism and homophobia, and the list goes on and on and on from there. But here's the really good news. If we simply just change the way we look at our target audiences, no factories to build, no equipment to buy, just change the way we look at people, you're going to change the results you get at work in a significant way, as much as an 8X on everything that you do. And if you change the way we look at the whole world, wow, my friends, we can actually change the world. So I'll end there. I'm out to see if we can't disrupt demographics. I hope I've said something helpful today. Watch for my new book coming out in the first quarter of 2022. If I had an actual date, I'd share it with you, but I can tell you the title. It's called The Death of Demographics. Follow me on LinkedIn, go to valuegraphics.com, and stay tuned right here. Like we used to say in the TV world, do not touch that dial, because there's some amazing insights and impressive roster of marketers and experts coming up next. I hope you've enjoyed this, and thank you for your time.